Hey, what is up guys, welcome to the very first multiplayer tutorial we have on the channel. This one is quite simple. We're creating a simple flow where the server talks to the client and the client talks to the server again. So simple example here with a chat box. As you can tell right here, I've got two Unity running. I've got one that is simply a client, so there is no server running down here. But I've also got one in the background here running both a server and a client. I'm going to start this one. It says server has been started on this port, and now this is pretty much an empty server, and I'm going to connect to it. So it says Nurkman has connected. That is my client name, as you can tell, and with this guy I have a different client name, and we're gonna connect to the same exact server. As you can tell, this one is called goodtimes123. So on the other window you could see goodtimes123 has connected, and that's just another application. So that's pretty much just a client, and that's a server and a client at the same time. That's what we create. Let's write a message to Goodtimes. Hey, dude, send. As you can tell, my message was written here, and in the other window, which is a little bit weird in terms of scaling, it says, hey dude, hi, send. That is definitely the best conversation you've ever seen. So guys, without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright guys, so as mentioned in the intro, this is going to be a two-part tutorial. We are going to start by creating ourselves some kind of UI, something we can actually look at, and then we'll start just plugging in the server in there and just slowly building up to having a functional chat server. Now for this build, we're going to be using TCP sockets, which is perfect for a chat server. It's perfect for async game. We're talking about chess, about checkers, all those kind of games. It's pretty good for that. So we are going to start laying down just the canvas of our starting UI. So what I visualize right now, what I want my user to see is you're going to have a window, and on that window you get to input a address, a host address, the IP address with a port. Then you click connect and you enter the chat room. As simple as that. So let's go ahead and just create a new canvas. And usually you do the UI afterward, but right now, since I really want to have like something visual as soon as possible going on, because we're making a video, then I'm gonna go ahead and just get this up right here, and with the visual we can test faster as well. So I've got a empty canvas. I will create a panel, as always, just like a panel that I center. Also put the scaling on screen size. Let's go ahead and just say, sorry, where's the scaler? Here it is. Scale with screen size, going to go with a 1920 by 1080 to get a nice 16:9 resolution, and the panel is going to be my login window. That panel is going to be, say, it doesn't have to be that big. I'm going to go for like 600 by 200. And under that login panel, there is going to be input fields. Here's the first one. It basically just says enter text right here. So let's just make this a little bit wider, maybe 400 by 50, and that is going to be my host input. Now I'm going to be looking for this object later on using its name, so it's really important you remember the name you put here. In my case, host input with a capital H and a capital I. Now fair enough, I'm going to move this on the left side. Actually, anchor this on the left side. And I'll just duplicate it. This is going to be my port input, and I'll just move this one on the right hand side. Adjust the width to 200. And here we go. So we have our two first input fields. Now I'm quickly going to change the placeholder text for, in this case, 127.0.0.1, which also stands for localhost. You could be writing a localhost here. While that might be a little bit useless, that's pretty much what we have to do until we get a real server. Now the default port we're going to be using is going to be something like 6321. That's good. And can we scale this up? I believe we can if we just... Yeah, let's scale this up. Both placeholder text. Okay, so something of the sort. And those are inputs. So if I press on play, I can actually write in there. Let me just put a camera here so we don't get that messy error. Those are input fields. I can actually change that. Alright. Let's quickly just move them up like this, and we are going to have a button. So new UI, and this one is going to be a button. 600 in scale, 50 in height. That is going to be our connect button. Quickly going to change the text to connect. And we end up with something like that. So we have our small UI ready. That's pretty much all we need to just see what's going on. Alright, so we have our basic UI. Let's start laying down the server. And now this is where it gets a little bit complicated. So let me start by creating a script folder. In here I'll create another folder called server and another folder called client. And we're going to start with the server. So let's go ahead and just create a new C# script that we're going to call server. Nothing too complicated. Okay, so here we are. Now that server is going to need a few information, and let me just wipe everything like I always do. And we're going to start with the simple one, a public int port. Now the port by default we said it was something like 6321. So that's going to be our default port. We're just going to leave it on that. Now it's also going to need a list of client. It needs to know like who are the people connected to the server. But since we don't really have a definition for that, let me just go beneath the class, and that's really important. You have to go beneath the class, and I'm going to declare another class in here that I'll call server client. So public class server client. And now the actual client is never going to be able to see that. Like if we're on different machines, then this is kind of hidden from the client itself. So this is only like a definition of who's connected to the server for the server itself. Now this one takes in, well, this one has a few parameters. Let me just write them down really fast. A public TCP client, and now you don't have this just yet. We're just going to call it TCP. TCP client is from the net.socket, so you're going to have to add this up here using system.net.sockets. And if you don't have it, what you can do, if you're in Visual Studio and you don't have it, you can just highlight, then hit Control and dot, and you get to have nice options down here you can use. Okay, it's also going to hold a name, so a public string client name, something really simple. And now when we construct that server client, so public server client, we're going to send him the TCP client. So TCP client, client socket, and when we create it, that's when we do a new. Then client name is going to equal something like guess, and TCP is going to equal the one we receive in parameters, something like that. That is the simple, very simple definition of the client for our server. So now we can go back to our actual server class and keep track of those guys by creating a list, so a private list of server client. Now to use lists, you have to include system.collection.generic, so make sure you do that. And you declare a private list of server client that I'll simply call client with an S. I'm also going to declare something else really quickly, a private list of server client again, but this one is going to be the disconnection list. So the disconnect list, and you'll see why we need that a little bit later on. It's pretty much just because you have to wait until the server processes some messages before you get disconnected. So it's not done instantly, so you kind of need to keep track of who is getting disconnected, and when it's your turn to disconnect people, then you can actually do it. So we'll see that a little bit later on, like I said. Other than that, you're also going to need a private listener for that. So, well, it doesn't have to be private, but a TCP listener that we're going to call server in this case. And let's keep track of whether it starts or not. So let's do a private bool server started. Okay, we're off a good start. Now, whenever we do want to start a server, let's do a private void start. So that's going to be called as soon as we press on the play button in Unity, because this is from mono behavior and we use mono behavior here. So whenever we start, let's start by initializing those lists we have. So clients is equal to a new list of client, and same thing for disconnect lists, a new list of clients. And now this is where the fun part begins. So this is where it gets a little bit messed up. We're gonna do a try catch at first. So let's do a try and a catch, catching the exception E. And if the exception doesn't work, you have to click on control dot and do a using system. Now let's quickly code the exception. Let's do a simple debug.log. If it doesn't work, we're going to say socket error is equal to e. Well, not equal, but is added up to e.message. So we actually know why the server couldn't start. Let's do server is equal to a new TCP listener, IP address .any. Now IP address is also something we don't have, so you have to do using system.net. Those are all my includes right now. So IP address.any, and the second parameter is the port. So you're going to be listening to pretty much anyone who connects to your server, and the port you're going to be listening on is 6321 by default, also known as port here. Alright, once this is done, you can do a server.start to actually start listening. So at this point, you can receive connection, but you can't really do anything with them just yet. So what we're going to do is create a small function that we'll call start listening, that we're going to be calling quite often, because TCP is something that is turn by turn. So everybody has like just a little moment with a server, and then it's the turn of the next one. They can't like communicate at the same time. So what we do is we start listening, and as soon as we know that somebody's talking to us, we just grab that message, we process it, and then we start listening again for another message. Now here's what we're going to do. So we're going to click on start listening, our function that isn't declared just yet, do a control dot on that, and generate a method, which is going to create that for you down here. So we start listening, and as soon as we're done with that, we can say that the server has been started. So server started is equal to true. Now we have to look at this function that we just created here. Start listening. What we do in here is called server.begin accept TCP client. Now this one takes in a callback that we haven't created just yet, and also the object state, which is server in our case. So for the callback, it's again another function we haven't created, and we're going to call it accept TCP client. So private void accept TCP client, just like this. And it's going to take in parameters that we just don't have yet. So let me just put that here and here. And now as far as the parameter goes, we are going to do async result AR, and then we get to actually process that a little bit. So we get the listener first, TCP listener is equal to AR async state, and this one we cast as a TCP listener, so just like that. Cool, so we have a listener. Now we're going to do a client.add new server client. We're creating a connection, we're adding a new client because somebody else just connected right now. Now the server client takes in a TCP client, which we've defined a little bit earlier before in the constructor, and that TCP client is actually listener.nAccept TCP client with the AR sync. So this is pretty much what we have to do here. We've waited for your input, we got the input, we connected the guy, and then we start listening again. So start listening, and that process can start all over again if we need to. And at this point we can send a message to everyone. Say someone has connected. So somebody else just connected to the server, and we should tell everybody that somebody connected. Right. And right now we don't have any clients, so we can't really test it out, but that's really the worst part, I guess. Let's go for the update now. Private void update, because we need to process everybody's message if they're sending one. Now, as far as the update goes, let's start with the simplest call. If the server is not started, let's quickly do a return statement. So if not server started, we do a return. Now for every single connected client, so for each server client C in clients, so I've named my individual server client C for this, then we're making sure, is that person connected? So is the client still connected? If he is, we check for messages from the client. we are going to create ourselves a little helper function for that. So let's start with if is connected, and that's going to be our function c TCP. So we're going to check with a socket. Let's go ahead and create that right away. So again, a function that has not been created, control dot to generate this, and it's not able to generate this at the moment, so we'll just simply write it down just below the start listening. So this one has to return a bool because we're using it in an if statement here, and that's the whole point. Is connected takes in a TCP client that we'll just call C again. So right here we're going to start with a try catch because there's chances we can't actually reach the client, and if we can't, we do a catch and we simply do a return false. In case we're not able to reach him, let's just disconnect him. Now if we're able to reach him, then let's go ahead and just do some checks. So if client, actually C, because that's our client here, if C is not equal to null and C.client is not equal to null and C.client.connected is true. Now here's the part that confuses me a little bit, so just bear with me. Return, and then we do a not before that. So client.client receive, we send a byte of 1, so an array of byte 1, so a single byte basically, and we do a socket flag dot peak. If that's equal to 0, now I'm gonna be totally honest with you guys. I'm not quite sure what these lines do, but these 4 lines here, what they do. But it's been recommended to me by somebody that's really good with servers, so I'm just going to leave them there. But usually, what I do is just a simple return through in here, which is what we're gonna do because if there's like nothing going on here, we can fall back on through. Right. So we have our helper function now. We can go back to our update. If we are connected, then well, actually, if we're not connected, because that's the actual conditional block where we're not connected. So if we're not connected, let's do a client TCP.close. So we're gonna close the socket, and we're gonna add him to the disconnection list. So disconnect list.add C. After that, we're gonna do a continue. Right. So continue, so we can move on to the next client. And now the next client, let's assume the next client is connected, then we run him through the else statement. But what exactly do we do if somebody is connected and we have an update frame? What we're going to do is check if he has any messages for us. Right now we're the server and we're checking if those guys who are connected to me, basically, have a message for me. So we do this like that. So network stream, we create a network stream, and that network stream is going to be the client TCP stream. So C TCP get stream, and if we have some data available, so now if we have some data available in that stream, that means he has a message for us, and we're gonna read it. We're gonna read it using the stream reader that we're gonna call reader, and this is from IO. So let's just make sure we do a control dot on that and do it using system.io. So stream reader is equal to a new stream reader again, s, and through for that parameter. Now the data we get, we're going to store it inside of a string. So string data is equal to reader get line, or actually read line, my bad. If data is empty, actually if data is not empty, we're going to go ahead and just run a callback. So let's just call it on incoming data. It's sent from this client, so C, and we're sending the actual data. Alright, so now on incoming data is going to be a function that pretty much just not filter, but it just pretty much process the messages we get from the client. Now we know, using this parameter here, we know which client sent us the message, and the data is the actual message itself. So what we can do is, let me just put these together, and we're going to create that very cool function that we'll pretty much just use everywhere. Private void on incoming data, which takes in a server client C, that's the person who sends the message, and a string data. That's the message itself. Right. So at the moment we should be able to receive messages from clients, but we don't have a client just yet. So again, we can't test this out at the very moment, but we'll be able to do that quite fast. So on incoming data, I don't think we're going to do anything here just yet. Let's just do a debug.log and say c.client name plus has sent the following message, and let's just put the message in here, so data. Something like that, so we can test it out a little bit later on using the console itself. And that's pretty much all we need to have the server running. Now, I'm just simply going to give this a small try, just booting it. We're not going to have any effect in the game, and we're not really going to be able to see anything, but at least we'll give it a try. Oh, you know what? We can actually go back in our code, and when we are done with the start, let's say debug.log server has been started on port, then add the port here. That's the very minimum we can do, and that's the int, so we have to do a toString here. Okay, so to have this server going on, we need an object that has a server. Why do we need an object? Actually, we need an object because we're using mono behavior to start the server. What I'm saying here is we're using the start function itself. Now that's not here in normal C# language. The only reason the start is being called is because we inherit from mono behavior. And for that to be called, we need to have an object that we'll call server, so a empty game object. I'll call this server, put this in the center of the world, just clean it up, maybe put it in an icon, why not? And this guy here is now my server. Let's put the script on it. We also have the port here by default. And let's go ahead and just hit play. Hopefully we can see that it has been started on port 6321. Now let's try and put it on another port that is being taken, like the HTTP port. I'm going to put that on 80. See if I can actually start it. It says socket error, only one usage of each socket address is permitted. Now port 80 is already taken by my browser, by the HTTP protocol actually, so I'm not able to put my port on that. You have to use a port that is not being taken, so in my case 6321 was actually pretty good. Alright, so that's a lot of information to digest for now, and I'm going to end it here for part 1. Let's just make sure we have a script that is working well, a server that starts. While we can't really see what's going on just yet, we have a very good beginning, and we're going to keep going on with the part 2. In the part 2 we're going to be doing the actual client, the real client, and we're going to be connecting to our server. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video or if you learned something, then please leave a like, always appreciate that. If any question or comment, please leave them in the comment section below, and you can also check out the Facebook page and also the Patreon page. Thanks a lot for watching again, and I'll see you in the next one.